I can start. Hello. Okay, hello. In my today's presentation, I'll try to pose a question. If the future of Web3 data layer is centralized? And first, let me introduce myself. My name is Slava. I'm CTO at dRPC.org, and we're building a decentralized RPC for the multi-chain future. So maybe you don't know what's this mystical Web3 data layer, but maybe you've heard about RPCs. Or even if you haven't heard about the RPCs, you probably heard about blockchains. So yeah, if you heard about blockchains, you probably know that blockchains are basically a fancy way to synchronize state in decentralized fashion between different computers. So the real core value of every blockchain is its state. And if you're building Web3 application, you have to access it somehow. So typically, every blockchain client has some kind of API that you can query. So why is it called then RPCs in our industry? Well, historically, Ethereum and Bitcoin decided to go with JSON RPC protocol, which example of the query you can see on the slide. And the term sticks. It may be not the best word to describe blockchain APIs, but we kind of using it right now, so I'll use it in my presentation as well. So historically, of course, everyone thought is, for example, you're building Ethereum wallet, and how could you access the state? You would just run your own node, and everything would be in this perfect, cool, decentralized fashion, no censorship, nothing, everything's perfect. However, it's 2024, and we kind of live in multi-chain world. It means if you're building a serious Web3 application, you probably need several chains, maybe dozens of chains. So you have to run dozens of nodes, and it's just too complicated, too expensive, and basically nobody does that. So, of course, naturally, the type of company appeared that we call now RPC providers that run your nodes for you, and you just pay them money. So these companies are typical Web2 software as a service companies. So we're kind of building decentralized Web3 on top of centralized Web2 companies, but temporarily, right? Well, let's think about it. And first, let's ask ourselves a question. What do clients want? And we talked with hundreds of Web3 projects and asked them, what do they want from RPC or blockchain API companies? So first, of course, they want user experience and developer experience to be good. They want a high speed, high reliability, and of course, low cost. But what they don't want? First, they really don't care about decentralization, and they don't want a fancy technology with bad developer experience. And it's understandable, because remember, these are Web3 projects. They are businesses too, so they have clients, they have businesses to run. They now have time to think about, we were down yesterday for 3 hours, but we used decentralized RPC provider because their clients won't understand them. They will just go to their competitors who maybe use centralized provider. So centralization is a status quo. It's not because we're bad industry or bad people. It's just because it's the most efficient and the easiest way to achieve the client's desires. To provide this service with good reliability, good performance, yada yada. So let's talk about why would we even want decentralized RPCs? And let's try to be honest this time. First, maybe decentralized RPC providers or decentralized projects have better UX DX. You probably know the answer. The answer is no. Historically, of course, centralized RPC providers and, in general, centralized services have better UX and DX. Well, maybe then reliability is decentralized RPC providers is better. Well, there is an argument that we, decentralized RPC providers, have been running for some years for you, that decentralized RPC providers don't have a single point of failure. They're distributed. But unfortunately, every single one of decentralized RPC provider on the market right now running centralized gateways. So effectively, there is no difference in terms there's always a single point of failure. And again, decentralized RPC providers do that not because we want to lie to you. It's just because of the previous point. We want to have good DX, and developers, they want to just copy-paste the HTTP link and just be done with it. So we have to have those centralized gateways. Otherwise, of course, because centralized RPC providers, they tend to think more about their clients because they don't have to think about all this, fancy decentralized stuff. They kind of historically perform better in terms of reliability. What about performance? You could maybe argue that because, if you're building decentralized RPC providers, probably you connect to your protocol some external companies that are distributed all over the globe, and then your latency, for example, is better. I would argue that actually centralized providers can do everything that decentralized providers can do. And because they also have, everything is controlled environment for them, like they control networking, hardware for nodes, hardware for gateways, they can do the best setup and best performance in theory. So it all depends basically on engineering efforts of each team. But in theory, centralized providers even faster. The common argument in this, decentralized with centralized RPC is verifiability. And I'll just talk about it a bit. So we have a problem when you build your Web3 application, you talk to the RPC provider, you basically trust everything you get from them. You don't have an easy way to verify the response, and nobody cares most of the time. As every time nobody cares until something bad happens. And for example, someday you will go to some voting platform for very important project, very important vote, and this time RPC provider decides to tamper with your data, and you probably end up voting for some thing you don't understand or don't agree with, and it can be it can have a disastrous outcome. However, we haven't seen such cases yet, but how can we defend ourselves in theory? So the obvious thing is light clients. Maybe some of you heard about them, but essentially it's a very lightweight node that you can run on your phone. It basically connects to some RPC provider, doesn't matter, centralized or decentralized, and it verifies each call, each response. So you then connect your dApp node to this light client and use it as RPC, local RPC node. And yeah, this way RPC provider won't be able to fool you. It's totally verifiable. Everything is cryptographically correct, yada yada. And there are existing solutions for Ethereum. For example, Kevlar and Helios are doing that right now. However, there are a number of problems. First, it's very inefficient. Every call to this client will probably translate to several calls to RPC providers, so we will probably pay more, and also it will be slower. Then not all calls can be verified in that way. And the latest thing is that not every chain supports light clients. For example, Ethereum does, but many more don't do that. Okay, then next, we can imagine some solution with ZK magic. Imagine RPC provider will return some ZK proof of validity of the data they respond with. However, technology is not yet there. Of course, it's first computationally infeasible. It's too computationally intensive to do that. And I actually struggle to imagine how can we do it universally for multiple chains. However, yeah, you can imagine in future maybe we build something like that. And the latest way is quorum check. You basically can ask different RPC providers. You can compare the result, and if majority agrees, you can trust this data. So in this case, yeah, of course, it doesn't matter, decentralized, centralized, you can do that either way. And you can argue that in decentralized setup, you can punish providers that lie economically. However, yeah, it doesn't make matter. It really doesn't matter. So it goes both ways. So far, it doesn't look good for decentralized providers. And centralized providers are clearly winning. So what about cost efficiency? And that's the first thing I would argue that decentralized providers can do significantly better than centralized. So first reason is because those node runners that participate in decentralized RPC providers, they can actually squeeze more juice from their hardware. Because, for example, they can participate in different protocols simultaneously. And those protocols, for example, they can run dRPC Ethereum node for dRPC, then they can use this node for a graph indexer, and then, for example, if they have some spare compute that is not really utilized by those protocols, for example, they have GPU installed, they can participate in something like IO.NET or something like that. So they can squeeze more juice, as I said, from this hardware. And the second reason is that because those node runners, they have, there's a lot of them. If you implement some kind of price auction or price discovery mechanism, the price discovery will be significantly more efficient for them. So price will be probably lower or at least more fair than for centralized ones. And centralized providers, of course, compete on price too, but there is not too much of them, so this price discovery is not so efficient. And also, there's a lot of stuff besides price, for example, like marketing, PR, BD, all that stuff. So what about multi-chain? Maybe decentralized providers are better at multi-chain. Yes, I think it's also true, because if, for example, you're building a centralized RPC provider and you want to support new chain, so what do you need to do? First, you need to add some code, like for a gateway or something. Then you need to buy new hardware or rent servers, and then you need to learn how to run the nodes. And that's everything is very hard, so it's like adding new chains is hard for centralized providers. For decentralized providers, you just need to add some code for your gateway, and then you need to find some people who already have spare compute, spare hardware, have maybe already running those nodes or know how to run those nodes. And it basically using crowd wisdom. And because of that, for example, dRPC is able to support 60 blockchains, I think the biggest number on the market. It's just because it's far more easier for us. And the last thing is, most important thing, of course, is censorship. So what about censorship? Censorship on the end of the RPC providers is not unheard of. We've seen this already multiple times. However, I will say that it's getting worse. For example, this paper was released recently by a group of legal researchers who actually they want to propose a framework for battling illicit activity in DeFi. And they say that, okay, in TradFi, that battling illicit flows is all about intermediaries. If you can control intermediaries, implement some measures on those intermediaries, you basically can, stop illicit actors from transferring the funds. And they correctly identify that RPC providers are actually the, ultimate intermediary in DeFi. Everything goes through RPC, like new transaction, read request, everything. So, okay, they say, well, let's then define CCT, this term critical communication transmitter, and basically say that every commercial RPC provider is CCT. And then we ask them, require them to implement risk management practices and procedures reasonably designed to help mitigate illicit finance activity in ways tailored to their operations, which is basically means implement censorship mechanisms. Can it work? Well, first I want to say battling illicit activity in DeFi is a very noble goal. However, imagine there's some hacker who stole some funds and they need to run a transaction. Would it be hard for them to run their own node or, for example, to find a censoring node to run several transactions? I would say no. It's pretty easy. However, for example, say we want to censor some big project like DEX or any other big projects. Well, for them, it would be significantly more harder to bypass those regulations. They basically would have 3 options. First, they could run their own nodes, they can use some unregulated providers, and they can submit a censorship. As we previously discussed, running their own nodes probably will kill any Web3 project because of complexity and cost. So it's not really an option. So the choice is really between using unregulated providers and censorship. And it's really hard to say how it will play out. However, remember in the beginning I was talking like this. In RPC market, it's everything about reliability, performance, and cost efficiency. So market leaders who are best in these things, they will immediately comply. It's not a question. So the unregulated providers we would be left with are worse than that. And in many ways, for example, privacy, security, you can compare this with, for example, free VPN situation. Where if you use some shady VPN and can gather, sell your data, it's a little bit frightening. Or those unregulated providers could be very prone to hack and tampering with data. So maybe in the end, if we have this status quo right now, the only way to do would be to submit censorship for those projects. And as I said, for centralized providers, it's not a question to comply or not. They will eventually all comply or close or cease operations in the country of regulation. But for decentralized providers, it's more complicated because, as I previously mentioned, there's a community of node runners, and they all can, each and one of them can decide for themselves whether to comply or not. And you can argue, okay, but you're running centralized gateway. Yes, that's true. And for example, this centralized gateway right now could be censoring. However, if we have a community of node runners who are all unified in some protocol, well, you can run multiple gateways, and some of them will be censoring, some will be not. You can compare with the situation in Ethereum right now on censoring on the protocol level. For example, you only need a fraction of non-censoring MEV relays, non-censoring block builders and validators for non-compliant transactions to go through. So if we still, if there's at least 10–20% of node runners and gateways will be uncensoring, it will be enough, and it will probably make those kind of regulations inefficient. So let's think about what we talked since so far. So if you're building a centralized provider, you have better cost efficiency, multi-chain, and of course censorship resistance. Decentralization is the only way to battle censorship we know of. Verifiability kind of goes both ways, doesn't matter. And centralization, centralized providers have better UX, DX, performance, and reliability. So if you remember what I've talked in the beginning, centralized providers are winning hard. So if nothing changed, everything, our future is actually extremely centralized with censorship mechanisms on Web3 data layer. Can we do something about it? Well, actually, the real question, can we get everything? Because can we get everything? Can we get every trait of decentralized and centralized providers basically in one project? And yeah, that would probably solve the problem. So that's what we're exploring in dRPC right now. We kind of try to understand, is it possible to build a decentralized RPC provider that is on par or better in terms of reliability or speed? So far, I would say we proved, have a proof of concept because we were able to onboard very cool projects like Lido, SushiSwap, InstantApp, Curve, and many more. And they selected us not because of our decentralization or narrative. They selected us because they chose us because we're actually better or on par with our competitors. And it's because we decided that, we've already seen the projects who, for example, have a decentralized set of permissionless set of node runners. We know how to do that, but we haven't seen the project who can have the same quality of service as on centralized providers. So we focused more on our gateway that allows us to offset individual problems of individual provider problems and optimize for latency and reliability. And we went with a permission set of providers because we know that in future we can decentralize it more and add permissionless, make it permissionless. So now we think our next step is how to push the decentralization further. But we don't want to do it just for sake of decentralization. We want to understand, if it's possible to add more decentralization without sacrificing quality of service. Because in my opinion, it's the only way that we can have a future where there is a Web3, truly decentralized Web3 with truly decentralized data layer without censorship. And we're trying to build this future, and if you want to check it out, go to drpc.org. And if you want to follow our Twitter account, there's a QR code. And thank you for your time. That's it.
Awesome. That was a very action-packed, information-full talk. Thank you. And we do have a couple questions for you. So if you want to follow the Twitter, scan it real quick, because we're about to switch to the Slido. The first question that we have for you is, do end users care about censorship, and how can we make them care? $1 million question.
I would say that it's kind of, end users shouldn't care about it because, it's not They only care when their favorite project is on flying because of censorship. But it's already, too late. So the industry, the Web3 applications, and we as a whole, industry as a whole should care about that. The end user, we shouldn't think about them too much in terms of like, should they care or not? Some of them probably will do. They care more about privacy, security, stuff like that. But for example, censoring tornado cache. Do they care? Well, those who use tornado cache, of course, care. Others don't, and that's natural. And you can't force people to think about theoretical threat. Like when we talk about huge mass of people, it's hard. So you can convince individuals or individual businesses about that, but you can't say the narrative is very hard. Like to push this narrative and say you should everyone should care. We've seen successful narratives right now and in the past, but it's hard to control and hard to predict, hard to manufacture. So I would say we just need the awareness should be built throughout the Web3 businesses who actually are threatened by censorship.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of us are here trying to do, right? Talk about it. This last question we have is, so transactions would never make it to the blockchains because of this censorship, and why isn't this spoken about more?
It's a good question. So I'm doing my part, but it's like, I think there's two parts. First is, as we talked a little bit about, end users or, common folks, they don't care because they have a lot of information. It's hard, to care about everything. If we're talking about, I'm liking the better word of elite or something like opinion makers. Why don't they care more? Well, maybe it's because it's a little bit boring. I mean, it's not so exciting like, I don't know, sharding or, I don't know, data blobs, failing Solana transactions. There are probably more, more interesting, more exciting things that you can apply your mind and intelligence to than censorship problem on RPC layers, because I think most of the opinion makers, they think that it's not a very probable future. That eventually, there will be some way to pass your transaction still, because, for example, all of them probably are capable of running their own node and submitting transaction directly to this node. And if protocol is not censoring, so who cares? But I think a lot of them fail to understand that for big if you're an individual, you can bypass this problem. But only if you have a special set of skills. But for end users, for example, and Web3 businesses, it would be actually very hard.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think we all care, right? Yeah? Cool.